Now a question you might not have pondered before. What can a medical center learn from an auto manufacturer? News Hour health correspondent Betty Ann Bowser has the answer.
And over to the right, over to the right side.
63-year-old Robert Sherrill had no idea lower back pain could hurt so much.
It's like, wow, what's that? And it was tremendously weakening, and it took me right down.
Any problem with that?
Sherrill is among the 80% of all Americans who will have a bad back sometime in their lives. And when that happens, many patients undergo an MRI, an expensive imaging test. But 9 leading doctor specialty groups recently said MRIs are often a waste of money and medically unnecessary.
All the way down.
Doctors here at the Virginia Mason Medical Center in Seattle take that to heart.
Good.
They use special software at the lower back pain clinic that rejects any order for an MRI unless a long list of criteria has been met.
If there is no evidence-based indication, the test cannot be ordered.
Virginia Mason's Dr. Robert Mecklenburg says in just 3 years, they've eliminated unnecessary procedures and saved money.
And we've seen well over 10,000 patients in this clinic. Their return to work is twice as fast as the old style of back pain care that we delivered before. Their patient satisfaction is much, much higher. The cost of delivering the care is much less.
The software is part of the medical center's war on waste that started more than 10 years ago. At the time, the center was losing money, and Dr. Gary Kaplan had just been named CEO.
Waste is all of those things which add no value for the customer. It's embarrassing, frankly, but we find most processes, 70 to 95% of the time that's spent adds no value for the customer. The waste of waiting, the waste of movement, the waste of over-processing, the waste of excessive inventory, all wastes that add no value.
Kaplan learned that lesson from studying the philosophy behind the world-famous Toyota production system. It's based on the idea that if waste is rooted out along the assembly line, the result is better cars and lower costs. Some of what Toyota does may sound like common sense, but when a little of it is applied here and there, it can add up to big savings. That can mean anything from returning patient phone calls faster to moving supplies to where the patients actually are. The prestigious Institute of Medicine recently zeroed in on waste. It said $750 billion is wasted every year in the American healthcare system. It also recommended more teamwork among doctors and nurses, saying that would make care more efficient. At the Kirkland Clinic in suburban Seattle, teamwork is a mantra. That's why Rhonda Shuda goes there for her health care.
Here to see Dr. Morrison. I just go straight to the check-in. They give me a card. You go straight to your room, and within a couple of minutes, a care nurse comes into the room and checks your weight, checks your height, blood pressure, and she calls the doctor in, and we just update and talk about what's going on.
And Shuda doesn't waste a lot of time waiting to see the doctor, because Kirkland doesn't have waiting rooms.
It's just an embarrassing reminder of how inefficient we are in healthcare delivery. It's just a shame to see waiting rooms. And we devote huge amounts of money to fancy waiting rooms.
Virginia Mason is slowly getting rid of waiting rooms at all its facilities. It's been able to do this by taking calls for appointments as they come in, instead of letting them back up at the end of the day. All of this has meant the staff has to change some very basic ways it thinks about the delivery of care. Here at Kirkland, it's the medical assistants, or MAs, who control the workflow.
So this is the flow station, and this is the place where the provider and the MA work together as a dyad. The MA we call a flow manager now, and the flow manager is directing us about what we should be doing.
Like a traffic cop.
Like a traffic cop.
Dr. Richard Furlong is medical director of the Kirkland Clinic.
The physician takes direction from the MA, and that's a change for providers to accept direction from an MA. The work is spread across the team, and we're no longer the center of the universe. The patient is, and the team is what's delivering the care. Frankly, I think it was even hard for the MAs at first, but we broke that down. Now, frankly, I think if you watch them, they actually enjoy bossing us around.
Great to see everyone this morning.
Kaplan and his staff first got the idea for doing these sorts of changes when they started visiting Toyota in Japan back in 2002. They were convinced that some of the big car makers' philosophy would work in Seattle, but it was a hard sell to the staff of 5,000.
I would say in the beginning we maybe had 10% early adopters, really champions of this work, and then there were 10% that I sometimes say over my dead body, I'm not going there, and then 80% in the middle.
What the doctors did not like was something that happens all the time on the assembly line.
That's really fascinating. They make 1,000 cars a day in the factory. There's 350 workers. And if the worker doesn't have what he needs to do his job or sees something that he's concerned about, he can pull the cord and stop the entire factory. It kind of was mind-blowing.
Today, that is more than just an idea. At Virginia Mason, every employee is expected to report any serious concern they may have.
Wait, come in.
It's helped reduce liability costs by 60% since 2004. It's also led to better patient care. The hospital's nursing staff has been part of the change. Charlene Tachibana is Senior Vice President and Hospital Administrator.
We really started looking at where nurses were spending their time, and we found that they weren't spending it with patients.
In fact, they were spending too much time collecting supplies and drugs ordered for patients by the staff. So supplies were removed from a central storage room and put into hospital rooms bedside.
Through a variety of changes, we wound up taking our nurses' time from 35% in direct contact with patients to upwards of 90% of their time in contact with patients.
But there have been bumps in the road. Some traditional healthcare thinkers say the medical center is practicing a one-size-fits-all form of medicine. But Kaplan and his staff remain committed.
The case for change is compelling. The resistance to change and the anchoring in the status quo is still very strong. And so that's our objective here. We talk at Virginia Mason about transforming healthcare, and some might say, well, it's delusions of grandeur. And really all we really want to do is show what's possible.
A number of hospitals are now experimenting with Toyota Production System principles. Meanwhile, Virginia Mason was recently named Hospital of the Decade by a respected healthcare rating organization.
What's to blame for rising healthcare costs? We break down 7 factors that drive up spending. And what could we buy with the billions of dollars wasted? Our infographic offers some examples. Plus, you can see a comparison of U.S. spending on healthcare compared to other nations. All that is online.